Während im Anschluss an die Sony-Pressekonferenz überall hier noch weiter gefeiert wird, gehen wir weiter arbeiten, so wie ihr es von uns gewohnt seid. Und zwar zu einem Panel über Storytelling, wo darüber geredet wird, wie man virtuelle Geschichten am besten erzählt. Damit kennen wir uns aus, denn wenn wir morgen total verkatert bei Nintendo, Sony, Sega und sonst irgendwo auflaufen, brauchen wir auch ein paar gute Geschichten.
I'm Dan Marr, gaming expert and broadcaster. That's what they've put here anyway. And I'm here to, well, I think it's largely to prevent any fistfights breaking out amongst this lot, really. But on that note, gents, would you mind introducing yourself, starting with yourself, Darby?
Yeah, I'm Darby McDevitt, the lead writer of Assassin's Creed 4, Black Flag. I live up in Montreal, been in the industry about 14 years as a writer, designer and producer.
Hi, I'm Russ Harding. I'm the creative director on Wonderbook, Book of Spells and Book of Potions, and I'm from London Studios.
Hi, I'm Dan Pinchbeck. I'm the writer-director of The Chinese Room and of the recently announced Everybody's Gone to the Rapture.
My name is David Cage. I'm CEO of Quantic Dream and writer and director of B.E.A.N.S.
I'm Shu Yoshida, president of Worldwide Studio for Sony Computer Entertainment.
A couple of weeks ago, the PlayStation blog team ran a poll amongst its community to vote on the most emotional moment in gaming. And that shortlist was picked from a number of moments that the users had picked in a previous weekend debate, as they call it on the PlayStation blog. Now, there were some truly memorable moments in that lineup. There was the death of Aeris in Final Fantasy VII. There was the shock reveal of the origami killer in Heavy Rain. And there was the surprise conclusion of Red Dead Redemption, which I won't spoil for you here, just in case. But one scene had to win out, and here it is. And I will warn you at home, minor spoiler warnings.
It's okay, baby. We're safe. We're safe. Hey, we need help.
Stop!
Please. It's my daughter. I think her leg's broken.
Stop right there!
Shit. Please don't. Oh no. Sarah. Move your hands, baby. I know, baby, I know.
It was really refreshing to see something as contemporary as that moment in The Last of Us winning out. For me, when I played that moment, I definitely kind of welled up a little bit playing it. And I find it particularly impressive because at that point in the game, I'd only got to know these characters for about 5-10 minutes. And for them to affect me as much as they did in that short period of time was an amazing moment. Not only that, but it provided a really kind of great reason for the real dramatic shift in Joel's character, you know, as we join him after the events of the pandemic later in the game. The fact that the PlayStation community has really embraced this moment shows that gamers really are ready now to tackle games that tackle more kind of, you know, emotionally mature themes. Storytelling and narrative are now kind of as fundamental to gaming as strong play mechanics or pretty visuals. Does it help to have this wealth of like historical events to help inspire these stories that you create?
Yeah, I mean the idea that truth is sometimes stranger than fiction or more interesting than fiction holds. Specifically with AC4, we gave ourselves the goal of bringing the real stories of pirates to life. So that meant that as a team we had to get rid of all these received notions of what pirates are, and then when you go into the historical detail and you have to start discarding things that people taken as granted. So historical research and grounding things often leads to a set of constraints that are very interesting. I think that constraints for any artist are actually more interesting than having carte blanche. They make you think in different ways. I think, you know, a lot of times, a lot of science fiction and fantasy suffers from that idea of just put as many spikes on your armor as possible, or these kind of things. So that's what history brings.
I think for us, I mean, we kind of look at it as saying that gameplay is an emotional experience, and you want a type of emotional journey for the player, and story is just a tool to get towards that. In the same way, it's a mechanic in the way that all the other features of game design are mechanics. So it kind of starts from that target of saying what kind of journey would you want the player to have, what kind of emotional response do you want the player to have. And I mean, it's one of those things, I think, writing, like most kind of creative aspects of game design, it's sometimes difficult to quantify and break that down into technical things. You kind of go, I know where I'm going, and things naturally kind of fall into place and bubble up. And that's kind of the easy bit, and the hard bit is then taking those things that bubble up and turning them into a form that actually is going to be something which is going to solidly deliver what your vision is. So, yeah, in a weird kind of way, story for us is a tool.
I usually start with something from my personal experience. This is what I started a little bit on Fahrenheit and really on Heavy Rain. That was a game about my experience being a young father. And then I write for a year, and then I discover what I really wanted to talk about, in a way. And it's a strange process because actually you write and you think you write something, but actually when you're done with the script, you read what you wrote and you realize that you talked about something totally different than what you thought. And that's it's a discovery process, and this is what I love the most about it. A game is interactive, that's its true nature, and this is what is so amazing about it, is that it's not just a story that you watch, it's a story that you play. And what is really challenging now is to discover how we can tell better stories through gameplay and not through cutscenes. How can we let the player tell his own story through his actions and not impose a story through a cutscene? And this is really the big challenge that we all face, because it's how can we merge interactivity and storytelling in a better way?
I think there's a reason that there's a term like JRPG, right? And as far as I can tell, there are more times, JRPG is the term is used. It has like slightly negative connotations, and of course some people love JRPGs, and that's great. But the part of that is cultural differences that the people in Western cultures may not appreciate the subtleties in Japanese game developers' stories, but the other times are just quality of the stories itself in these games. So definitely the culture plays a role, and for clever developers, many of the people I know try to avoid some concepts, ideas that may not transcend across different cultures.
Well, with films we have many differences and we have some things in common. We try to create emotion using moving images. This is something that we share. And we have interactivity that is something that we own, that is really our language and that we continue developing. But telling a story with moving images, with a script, with dialogues, with actors is something that we share. And films do that very well for 100 years. So there's a lot to learn here.
Now, a few years ago, most people would be more likely to compare gaming to film. I've recently noticed that people are starting to consider TV as the new benchmark for the quality of storytelling, thanks to the likes of like Breaking Bad, The Wire, Game of Thrones. Do you think that's more of an apt comparison for games to strive for, being that games are longer experiences and kind of loan themselves better to kind of episodic structure?
The Assassin's Creed series, we actually, this game specifically, we did a lot of data research to see what the average playtime of an Assassin's Creed fan is, and we found it to be somewhere on the order of 60 minutes to 90 minutes per play session. So when we were designing the memory sequences, as we call them, we kind of designed them around a narrative beat. There'd be a narrative beat for the entire game, but then there would be these mini beats that would sort of be episodic pieces of content. And we made sure that's knowing that a player is going to be with us for 20, 30 hours, that we had to surprise them in, a long term, medium term, and short term. The short term being, what is your objective at that moment, So yes, I think the TV series metaphor is apt. Games are longer quite often and require a great deal of attention.
Yeah, I agree that the format is definitely closer to TV series than films in many ways. We need to tell stories that are at least 10 hours long, but we also need to deal with an extra depth in the script that is non-linearity. So we don't tell just one story. We tell many different stories, many different variations around the story, giving different paths, different consequences to different actions, leading to different endings. So it's an interesting exercise, and it's some work. But you can do it, but you can only work with actors who respect the medium. I mean, there are many actors who will just come and say, okay, how much money am I going to get? And then you know that this is not the right actor for the piece. So with Ellen and Willem, they were really, truly interested by the script, but also by this new experience, something they haven't done before, and they just wanted to experiment and to try and see. So you need to find actors who have this mindset. That's for me very important.
So Darby, I understand an Assassin's Creed film is currently in the works with Michael Fassbender starring. And it was just announced the Watch Dogs films is also being produced in association with Sony Pictures. Although you can't say anything, do you believe these films may be the ones to finally break the 20-odd year long curse of the bad video game movie?
I have no idea. I'm
hopefully dodged.
Hopefully, yes. I mean, with our series, there's actually, it's broader than just that. There's comic books and short films that we've already done, and so we're just really dedicated to creating a large, believable universe. And it used to be, I think, in the 80s and 90s, when some game was announced, it would be announced for PlayStation 2 and Game Boy, you know, and it would ostensibly be the same game, but not really. So we, at least at the beginning of this franchise, we decided that every offshoot in whatever medium it was, it would tell its own story. It would feel like a necessary part of the universe. Sorry to disappoint you, though. I can't say anything about
That's fair enough. Jude, many games from Western developers now are attempting to do away with non-interactive cutscenes. You previously expressed your frustration at not being able to skip through cutscenes, but for many Japanese developers, it still seems that it's perceived as an integral part of the experience, and I can't help but think of games like Metal Gear Solid and series like that. Do you think there's still value in the traditional gaming cutscene?
Of course, yes. I'm trying to be politically correct here. Yeah, because I don't represent I do not necessarily represent the Japanese development community. But you know, one part of the choice of real-time storytelling comes from the production cost. You know, creating rendered movies is very expensive, and it's very hard to make changes, and you know, making everything real time helps in many regards, and the quality of the real time scenes are becoming better and better. Like you know, the social demo that Conti created was totally interactive, real time on PS4. That was amazing to watch. It's kind of very strange to see, you know, try to understand this is running in real time, and what it can allow the game developers to do compared to making very nice looking FMVs. So I think it's a natural progression.
Which do you think is more powerful, telling an emotional story through speech or not saying anything at all, which I guess is in reference to a game like Journey, for example? So let me pass that to Dan.
I think it's tools for the job. I mean, I think it's dangerous to say can and can't and should and shouldn't and to try and apply that blanket to some games. In some games, using speech is the only option. In some games, using speech is a terrible option. I think the way to kind of look at it is to, I mean, I think there's a standard thing of games are a visual medium and you should show, and I think we try and hold back voice for things that you can't represent or that wouldn't be effective if they represent, like complex and sort of ambiguous emotions tend to have the life drained out of them when they're represented visually, but you can go a great way with suggestion and inference with voice, so it's a useful place to use that. But at the same time, you know, describing is just stupid, it makes no sense at all. So yeah, that's a real cop-out of an answer, but I think it is. I think it's the only sensible thing. I think it's like creating any form of media. You look at the tools that are available to you and you say, where's my target? What's the best device for reaching that target? And you're smart about the way you deploy things. So yeah. I think it's interesting because we talked about TV earlier, and for me, I'm more interested in music and looking at things like the way in which orchestral constructions are made or jazz constructions are made to take the listener on a journey. And I think rather than looking at just mapping straight across from one visual medium to another, we can learn a hell of a lot from non-visual mediums in terms of how we tell stories, because you have incredibly complex emotional storytelling going on in music that doesn't have any kind of explicit narrative to it, which is incredibly inspiring, I think.
But it's more about rhythm and tone and beat.
Yeah, but it's the emotional response you generate through taking someone through that arc is really interesting.
No, I agree. It really depends on the story that you want to tell. Some stories need words. I don't think I could have written something like Heavy Rain being totally speechless. And at the same time, when I see what Journey does, I think it's fantastic, and it absolutely doesn't need any dialogue. But also what has changed for me through the years is the technology. Because in the past, when your character was scared, for example, you really needed him to say, "Oh, I'm scared," because no one could tell just watching. So now the technology has evolved to a point where actually you just watch, and in B.E.A.N, we were really surprised sometimes, because just looking into the eyes of the characters, you could tell what they were thinking or what they were feeling. And for me, this is really technology that allows that technology combined with talent, the talent of the actors, of course. And if you have these two things, you can really say things through just eye lines and different things like that.
Do you think we are now with PlayStation 4 at a stage where the quality of the performance capture and the facial capture is at such a stage that the writers are allowed to inject a lot more subtlety into their writing because so much can be conveyed through expression?
Oh, definitely. I mean, we were surprised by the result we got on the Dark Sorcerer demo on PlayStation 4. This is basically B.E.A.N.'s technology, just ported on PlayStation 4 with some tweaks here and there and improvements, but basically it's the same technology. And we really had the feeling we got a lot of subtlety, especially in the eyes and in the expressions, and performance capture now allows you to have body language in sync with the face and the audio. And for me, that's a major improvement. And for me, the quality of Dark Sorcerer is just the starting point. This is not an achievement, this is just the starting point. I mean, the quality will get much better than that through the next-gen cycle.
I think about something like, because I just read that you wrote the new Amnesia.
Yeah.
And I was playing, there's a difference, let's say, between a character you're seeing on screen being scared, as David mentioned, but also what about the player being scared. And I think increasingly, this is maybe the holy grail of game design is how to make the player's journey match, or if there's a character-driven drama, match the character's journey. And quite often when you're playing a game, if it's a character-driven game, you reach a point where you're settled and you're watching a scene, and the character on screen does something or says something that you yourself wouldn't have done had you been in control. And it happens, I mean, it's happened to me in the last couple of weeks playing some recent games that came out. But with a game like Amnesia, I remember actually playing it at the Ubisoft Studios on a lunch break, and there's people milling around me everywhere. There's no cubicles, so I can see 100 people around me, and I'm scared. My heart's pounding, and I'm playing. And that's a curious new area for games. A writer sort of helping direct that experience, but it's not necessarily a pre-written story. It emerges through the game mechanics, and those are the big problems I think a lot of us are maybe trying to solve in our own ways. I also have just one story about Amnesia Journey that I just loved, and I wrote about this a little while ago, is on that journey to the mountaintop, when you're traveling with somebody, the game mechanics encourage you to snuggle up to each other, to warm each other, right? And my experience was the complete opposite of a lot of people's, where every time I tried to come close to this guy, he ran away from me. And I think it was because he or she was afraid of intimacy. And I loved this moment where the game mechanics actually created this strange emotional dissonance between me, who I was trying to warm up with this guy, and whoever this person was in whatever part of the world was scared of me coming close and just ran away from me, and I ended up that journey alone. So that story is something I then come and I tell to everybody at work, and that's a strange place, I think, for writers especially. Where do we fit into that? Our words might work like music more than a narrative arc. I don't know, but I'd like to see more of that. I love that, and
So we'll move into the final topic, which is the future of storytelling. Russell, with Wonderbook, we're seeing a traditional medium for storytelling, older than that of cinema and TV, employed in an incredibly kind of cutting-edge fashion. So can you see the worlds of gaming and traditional storytelling kind of merging in even more interesting and entertaining ways as this next generation approaches?
Yeah, I think definitely. I mean, we're all talking about emotion in gaming and different techniques that we're using. I mean, I was going to say, actually, when we're mapping out a game from a design point of view, we talk about emotion always of the player and how they should feel at what point and where we want to get them to. So, and that's not necessarily always driven by narrative, it's about how we feel the pacing of a game should be. And I think in the future you'll start to see, obviously, we're evolving as games designers, we're learning new techniques as writers, and I think it's very interesting how games will change and whether emergent play will become more dominant soon, or whether I guess games will divide in the way that we perceive them. Maybe the more story-driven narratives will become bigger and more famous actors will appear in them. And whether things like Wonderbook will teach us how to actually make players protagonists and how we create worlds that people can participate in.
It was more about what are the kind of inherent challenges of doing kind of cross-platform storytelling, ensuring that they work
the challenges
together and apart.
Yeah, we just, like, for our part, we have I mean, Assassin's Creed is a big brand. It has a lot of people working on it simultaneously. So the challenge is sometimes just a structural one. You have to have a team in place who can handle all of these transmedia stories. You have to have people who are keeping an eye on it. Like, we write novels to go along with our games, but we always make sure to include not only the action of the game, but a huge chunk of new content. So that means the novel comes to me and I work with the novelist to flesh it out. But that's maybe more bureaucracy than anything. You just have to make sure there's a lot of eyes on it, a lot of creative eyes, and make sure that they're shepherding it in the right direction.
So looking at the trajectory of things, going in this industry, I'm very, very optimistic about the future of storytelling and character generation in the games. And so my goal is to live long enough to be really, when I'm getting older and my families would leave me and I'm alone, but I still be able to interact with really fascinating people in the digital world.
I'm really taken by games' ability to mess with a person's sense of scale. I remember there was a time in 2005 where I kind of thought about leaving the industry to pursue other writing projects, and then I played Shadow of the Colossus, and it convinced me to stay in the industry, specifically because of the scale of the story and the scale and the level of my involvement in that story. And games like Grand Theft Auto or Assassin's Creed create these worlds that because of the game technology, you're able to sort of explore a world in a way that no medium has ever allowed. So I'm interested in scale. I think that's whatever that means.
I just wanted to ask, we've talked a little bit about quite a lot about the influence of film on video game storytelling and how video games can learn from film. But I found that for most of the 2000s, some games were so obsessed with being films that they actually kind of forgot how to be games. Do you think that the preoccupation with film that video games have had for so long can be a limiting factor as well as a positive influence?
Yes.
Yes.
You can't limit your inspirations to one medium. It's stupid. It's just a stupid way of approaching it. You have to look at everything. And you also have to look at the fact that we're game developers and we make games, and games should develop their own language. And the faster we develop our own language, the faster we don't rely on other mediums, the better we'll be.
What I mentioned earlier, I think, playing a game where the mechanics and the narrative, the pre-written narrative, let's say, conflict is, let's say when I was playing The Last of Us, there was a level at which, what's his name, Joel, where his relationship with the little girl did not match my relationship with the girl. And I remember sitting back and watching this cutscene and feeling like all the things that I'd actually done, the mechanics where I have stealth options and I have combat options, and these are the sort of the physical tools I have. I had spent so much time protecting her or and protecting my group that when it came time to watch these cinematic sequences, I felt alienated from this guy on screen who I'd previously been controlling, and I think that at least at that level, this conflict is pretty heavy in a lot of games, but it comes from using the language of cinema at certain points and then shifting the burden to the player to accomplish these other, let's say, game verbs, run, kill, hide. So in that sense, relying on cinema too much can be quite a burden.
Schön da gewesen zu sein, schön mal ein paar Meinungen von Profis gehört zu haben, die wirklich ihr Geld damit verdienen, dass sie die Leute begeistern und Geschichten erzählen. Ich würde am liebsten jetzt noch hingehen und mir von David Cage sämtliche Genitalien signieren lassen. Geht aber leider nicht, habe ich heute leider nicht mitgebracht. Mensch, das ist aber ärgerlich.
Wie, deine Genitalien, die sind doch da.
Nee, die habe ich zu Hause gelassen,
nein.
leider. Doch, nein, das sieht nur, das sind Prothesen.
Komm, lass deine Genitalien. Timon, komm.
Geht's weg.
Ich fang ihn. Wie heißt der? Daniel?
Nein.
Daniel.
Du Arschgeige, du.